IELTS Listening, version K0010.
You will hear a number of different recordings, and you will have to answer questions on what you hear. There will be time for you to read the instructions and questions, and you will have a chance to check your work. All the recordings will be played once only. The test is in 4 sections. Write all your answers in the listening question booklet. At the end of the test, you will be given 10 minutes to transfer your answers to an answer sheet. Now turn to Section 1 on page 2 of your question booklet. Section 1. You will hear a brother and sister talking on the phone about arrangements for their father's 80th birthday party. First, you have some time to look at questions 1 to 6 on page 2. You will see that there is an example that has been done for you. On this occasion only, the conversation relating to this will be played first.
Hello?
Hello, Rob. Margaret here. I'm just calling about the arrangements for Dad's 80th birthday party.
Right. I've rung round the rest of the family. Most people do intend to come, even though it's a long journey. Have you made any progress with the venue?
Yes, there are 3 possible hotels we could use for the party: the Royal, the Star and the Winchester.
Oh, good. If we can make a decision now, you can probably book straight away on the internet, can't you?
Well, only the Star. I'd have to make a telephone booking at the others, but that'd be okay too.
The only hotel that takes online bookings is the Star Hotel, so the letter B has been written in the space. Now we shall begin. You should answer the questions as you listen, because you will not hear the recording a second time. Listen carefully and answer questions 1 to 6.
Hello?
Hello, Rob. Margaret here. I'm just calling about the arrangements for Dad's 80th birthday party.
Right. I've rung round the rest of the family. Most people do intend to come, even though it's a long journey. Have you made any progress with the venue?
Yes, there are 3 possible hotels we could use for the party: the Royal, the Star and the Winchester.
Oh, good. If we can make a decision now, you can probably book straight away on the internet, can't you?
Well, only the Star. I'd have to make a telephone booking at the others, but that'd be okay too.
Okay. So which one do you think?
I'm not sure. They're all fairly suitable and they're in really nice locations. The Star looks right out over the bay. It's on a cliff top. Then the Winchester is in lovely countryside too.
Yes, it's in the valley, isn't it?
Yes.
What about Mum's wheelchair? How easy would it be for her to get in and out of these places?
Well, I know that the Winchester would be fine, and the Star because I've been there with her before. I wasn't sure about the Royal because I seemed to remember it had a lot of steps, so I checked, and apparently it's had ramps installed recently, so there wouldn't be any problem there either.
Oh. And what about the kids? Which one do you think would be most suitable for them? Have they got play areas or anything?
The Royal hasn't got anything, but the Winchester has one. It's on the ground floor, they said, not far from the dining room. The Star's got one too, but it isn't under cover, and we don't know what the weather will be like, do we?
True.
Then there's the birthday meal itself. The Royal's the only one where there'd be a choice. The other 2 have a set menu at lunchtime. Mind you, they all do very good food apparently, so the quality should be fine.
I don't think it really matters whether there's a variety or not, but I think we need to have our own room, don't you?
The only one that can provide that is the Royal. The Winchester and the Star only have one dining room. so we'd just be sitting with the other guests, but in a separate area of the room.
That's not quite the same, is it?
No. But the other thing to consider is the price. Normally there's not much difference between them. Perhaps the Star's slightly cheaper than the other two, but the Winchester is offering quite a good reduction because there's so many of us. The Star and the Royal would just charge their standard rates.
So, taking everything into consideration, which one do you think we should go for?
The Winchester, unless you...
OK, that's fine by me. You've obviously gone into everything very carefully.
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 7 to 10 on page 3. Now listen and answer questions 7 to 10.
You've done nearly all the work so far, so what can I do now to help?
Well, could you manage the finances?
Of course. Do they want the whole amount in advance?
Just a deposit. I'll find out how much and let you know. Then if you could send that straight away to secure the booking.
Fine.
And I'll go and buy some invitations.
Oh, don't do that. I can produce them. I've got a program on my computer. It's easy.
OK, thanks.
Then, once we've had the replies, I'll call everyone who's coming to find out if they want transport.
Great. I can help out with that. Pick people up from the station or whatever.
OK?
Oh, yes. And could you stress that Dad doesn't want presents? He keeps reminding me. He says there's nothing he really needs.
OK. I'll try to discourage them. But you know what people are like. Anything else? Shall I do?
That is the end of section 1. You now have half a minute to check your answers. Now turn to section 2 on page 4. Section 2. You will hear the director of a club giving a talk about an ancient game played on ice called curling. First, you have some time to look at questions 11 to 16 on page 4. Now listen carefully and answer questions 11 to 16.
It gives me great pleasure to welcome you to the Montreal Curling Club. I hope you'll enjoy the introductory program we've prepared for you. I'll start with a brief introduction to the game itself and the equipment, so that you'll be able to enjoy it when you watch it later on. I'll then go on to say a little about the history of the sport and the club. So, first, let's take a look at the game of curling and the implements it uses. It's played on ice, and the object of the game is for two teams to push heavy stones across the ice towards a target. Now, there are 4 people in each of the 2 teams. The first is called the lead. The next is called the second. The next, surprise, surprise, is called the third. And the final player, who is absolutely key, functions as the captain, but is always called the skip. That's S-K-I-P. P. The area of play on the ice, whether it be on a rink or on a frozen lake or stream, is called the sheet. This long, thin area is 42.15 meters by only 4.25 meters. And unlike ice hockey ice, for example, it is constantly groomed by frequent shaving to keep it perfectly level. At either end of this are the two zones for the targets. Each one is known as a house. A little bit about the equipment we need. The stones are made from granite. Originally, these were held by your fingers in holes specially carved out in the top. But then it was decided to add a handle to get a better grip. The other distinctive implement is the brush, or broom. This is used for two purposes. To clean the ice, of course, but more crucially, to warm it. This melts the ice slightly and lessens the friction, so you get a smoother slide. Curling is not an expensive sport. You don't buy your own stones. In fact, it is illegal to play in a match with your own stones, but you can use your own brush. There are two main types, Scottish and Canadian. The former are normally made out of horsehair, and the latter, which are now more frequently used, are made of synthetic materials, and they don't leave as many threads on the ice. Now, apart from stones and brushes, the only other piece of equipment you would need as a beginner is a rubber sole on one of your shoes, depending on which shoe you lead from. The captain will often carry a stopwatch to gauge when the ice needs to be changed. All equipment and clothing can be bought in the club shop.
Before you hear the rest of the talk, you have some time to look at questions 17 to 20 on page 4. Now listen and answer questions 17 to 20.
A quick word about Montreal Curling Club. It's renowned, not only because it often wins championships, but because it was the first club for any sport in the whole of the North American continent. And although curling is not as well known as many other winter sports, we still boast a certain amount of influence in the National Sports Council. And what are the origins of the game? It's now well established that it started in Scotland in at least as early as the 16th century. Queen Victoria, on her frequent trips to Scotland, often played it, but wrote in her diary that it required exceptional strength to throw the stones. Her patronage attracted a great deal of interest in the game, especially amongst younger players. And this was enhanced further when she granted a royal title to the Caledonian Curling Club, which had been set up in the early 19th century to create standard rules for the game. Curling has always had support in high places. In the 16th century, the Scottish Parliament actually banned golf and football as violent and unprofitable sports. They felt that local men should spend any free time practicing archery for self-defense against their enemies. But the less popular game of curling wasn't included in the ban. The art of throwing stones was thought to be just as useful as shooting arrows. But back to Canada. Here the game has flourished since the beginning of the 19th century, when Scottish soldiers posted there enjoyed playing it on the frozen lakes and rivers. Because of the difficulty in importing granite stones from Scotland, cast iron was used instead, obtained from melted down cannonballs, which had originally been brought over from Europe. Now Canada is regarded as the most successful curling nation in the world. Now, the game you're going to see
That is the end of Section 2. You now have half a minute to check your answers. Now turn to Section 3 on page 5. Section 3. You will hear two students called Josh and Emily discussing an assignment on applying scientific techniques to art. First, you have some time to look at questions 21 to 24 on page 5. Now listen carefully and answer questions 21 to 24.
Hi, Emily.
Hi, Josh. Are you ready to work on the assignment?
Yeah. Now, we need to describe how modern scientific techniques are being used in the field of art history.
Right. And Dr. Abbott suggested that we choose some famous cases to illustrate the argument.
Okay, so what have you found?
Well, there's a Canadian forensic scientist called Biro.
Yes, I think I've heard of him.
What do you know about him?
Well, I'm a big fan of Jackson Pollock.
The modern American artist. Didn't he paint those really huge abstract paintings?
That's him.
I guess it would be pretty easy to fake one of those paintings.
No way, Emily. I know a lot of people think that even a child could paint one. To the untrained eye, they might look simple, but they're incredibly intricate works of art.
Well, sorry, but I really can't agree with you. Anyway, what did Biro find out?
Well, Biro worked on a case where a client asked him to prove that a painting she bought for only $5 was an authentic Jackson Pollock.
So was it a fake?
Well, Biro found evidence to show it was a genuine Pollock, but the art world didn't accept his findings.
Why?
Well, one critic said that compared to other Pollocks, the white and yellow lines on the painting were too straight.
Come on, Josh. That doesn't seem that convincing.
No, you're right. It is a bit weak. But the strongest argument was that there were no records of previous owners. For the painting to be authentic, you really should be able to trace the painting all the way back to the artist's studio.
Well, that's true, I suppose. Did they consult with anyone else?
The International Foundation for Art Research got involved.
And what was their verdict?
Well, they saw a definite similarity in the painting techniques used.
You mean the way Pollock dripped the oils on the canvas?
Yeah, and they noted the dirt and paint marks on the back, which all of Pollock's paintings have.
Why's that?
He used to lie his canvases down on the ground when he painted them. But the foundation were worried about the acrylic paint that was used on the painting. It's quite common now, but it was very unusual back in Pollock's day.
So it was probably painted much later.
Right.
So whose side are we on in this argument?
When it comes to art, you can see the art critic's point. If their knowledge and expertise tells them that it definitely isn't a Pollock painting, shouldn't we believe them? I mean, that is usually how it works in the art world, isn't it?
Art historians have always judged paintings, but things are changing now. If we have modern scientific techniques like fingerprint analysis, why not use them?
That's true. Well, maybe we need a combination.
I think you're right.
Before you hear the rest of the discussion, you have some time to look at questions 25 to 30 on page 6. Now listen and answer questions 25 to 30.
So did you find out anything else, Josh?
Well, have you ever heard of a painting called The Battle of Anghiari?
I have, actually. It's the lost masterpiece by Leonardo da Vinci, the famous Italian artist. What about it?
Well, an Italian art analyst called Seracini thinks he knows where it is, and he's using scientific techniques to help locate it.
How?
Well, art historians knew where the painting was last seen.
That's right, in the Hall of the 500 in Florence.
Right. So, Seracini had a theory that the painting was still there, and he set out to prove it. He used a lot of different technology, like radar and thermographic cameras, but initially he scanned every inch of the hall with a laser in order to make a really accurate 3D model of the building's design.
Did he think the painting was hidden in the building somewhere?
Exactly. Then, to find out what the hall looked like in Leonardo's time, he took pictures of it with a thermographic camera.
Couldn't he have used ultrasound to do that?
Not really. Different types of building materials produce different amounts of radiation, and you can really see those differences in a thermal image.
So, brick would look different from wood or glass, for example?
Yes. Seracini worked out what the building looked like when it was first built, and what renovations took place after that. He found that 2 large glass windows on the east wall had been removed and filled in by the time Da Vinci started work on his painting, leaving a space big enough for it.
But why hasn't the painting been seen for 400 years?
To answer that question, Seracini needed to study that wall even more closely.
Did he use the thermographic camera again?
No, this time he used another kind of technology, radar.
And what did that show?
It showed there were in fact 2 walls there, an older one and a newer one built in front of it.
So does Seracini believe that Da Vinci's painting is on the concealed wall?
Yes, on a stone wall concealed by the newer brick wall.
So, what's the next stage in the investigation?
Well, he isn't allowed to remove any plaster or bricks, so he's now experimenting with a gamma-ray camera to try and verify his theory.
Well, I think we've got some really strong examples there of how science can help art. Let's see if we can type up an outline.
That is the end of section 3. You now have half a minute to check your answers. Now turn to section 4 on page 7. Section 4. You will hear a lecturer talking on the topic of sustainability. First, you have some time to look at questions 31 to 40 on page 7. Now listen carefully and answer questions 31 to 40.
This week's lecture on a scientific topic of current general interest is on sustainability. The term sustainability is not new. It was first coined in 1987 in a report for the United Nations World Commission on Environment and Development. Since then, however, the term has been applied to everything from cars to agriculture and even economics. My specific focus, in fact, derives from this problem. I want to analyze what seems to me to be the confusion that surrounds sustainability. That UN document defines sustainable development as development that allows both the present and all future generations to meet their needs. Here is the first myth. Sustainability is not simply about the environment, which may come as a surprise to you. In fact, the original definition says nothing about it at all. Sustainability is not about protecting the world around us. The original focus was on finding ways to help poor nations catch up with richer nations, which primarily meant giving them similar rights to natural resources, water, food, energy, the things that many of us take for granted. The consequence and ultimate goal was improving living standards for all. Another myth is that sustainability is a synonym for green, as in green movement, green products, etc., although there is some overlap between the terms. Green suggests a preference for natural living, for example. When you go shopping, products marketed as green imply the absence of high technology and mass manufacturing processes. Those groups who campaign for sustainability, we can call them the lobby for sustainability, acknowledge that the situation is desperate. The main problem, they state correctly, is time. With 6 billion people on the planet now, and 1 billion more expected in the next 30 years, only technology will be able to provide everyone with an acceptable and safe lifestyle. Electric cars, wind turbines, and solar cells are key examples of this. They make great use of renewable resources while emitting fewer noxious chemicals. Nuclear power, too, is something the sustainability lobby has come to accept, unlike most greens. And here's the third myth. It concerns the role of technology. Technology is not rejected as evil, but we should not overemphasize the role of technology either. Take electric cars, for example. Researchers are currently working on plans to electrify the world's car fleet. New technology is currently being developed to make better batteries, giving longer performance. But a better way of thinking is perhaps to have battery stations for drivers to use on roads. When the battery is getting low, they simply swap the old one for a fully charged one. In other words, new business thinking, not new technology, for a sustainable future. There are similarities in agriculture, where knowledge can be more productive than new technology. Agriculture uses up about 3/4 of the world's water. Some crops are very thirsty and require a lot of water. So many farmers who believe in sustainability are now planting crops like sunflowers and wheat instead of corn, which are happy with much less water. In terms of water consumption, one of the biggest problems is that our diet is changing. As countries develop and people become richer, they aspire to a diet with more meat. Now, admittedly, most of the new births that will take our population to over 6 billion are going to be born in countries with largely vegetarian diets. However, most of them will be born in the city, and this is where water consumption is highest. That introduces the topic for next week's lecture, and we will be discussing.
That is the end of Section 4. You now have half a minute to check your answers. That is the end of the listening test. You now have 10 minutes to transfer your answers to the listening answer sheet. You have 2 minutes left. You have 1 minute left. Please stop writing and wait for your question booklet to be collected.